The stars looked different here, Captain Jake Morrison thought as he stared out the window of his ship. The UES Liberty had traveled farther from Earth than any human vessel before. Now they were in orbit around Zorathia Prime, the capital world of the mighty Zorathian Empire. Jake ran his hand through his brown hair and checked his uniform one more time. Today would make history. Humans were about to meet the most powerful alien race in the galaxy. The Zorathians ruled over 300 worlds and had been spacefaring for thousands of years, while humans were still living in caves. "Captain, we're getting a message from the planet," said Lieutenant Katie Bell from her station. She was Jake's best officer, smart and tough. Her red hair was pulled back in a neat bun and her green eyes showed no fear, even though they were all nervous. "Put it on screen, Katie," Jake said. A tall alien appeared on the main display. The Zorathian had purple skin that seemed to shimmer in the light. His head was longer than a human's, with large yellow eyes and no nose, just two small holes. When he spoke, his voice was deep and cold. "Human vessel, you may approach the capital. Do not deviate from the flight path we are sending you. Any wrong move will result in your destruction." The signal ended before Jake could reply. Katie looked at him with raised eyebrows. "Friendly bunch," she said. Dr. Alex Grant, the team's expert on alien cultures, walked onto the bridge. He was a thin man with gray hair and glasses who had spent his whole life studying other species. "That's normal for them, Captain. The Zorathians believe they are superior to all other races. They see us as children playing with toys we don't understand. Well, let's show them what these children can do," Jake said. He turned to the pilot. "Take us down, nice and steady." The Liberty descended through the atmosphere of Zorathia Prime. Through the windows, Jake could see massive cities that stretched as far as the eye could see. Tall spires of crystal and metal reached up toward the sky like frozen lightning. Flying vehicles moved between the buildings in perfect patterns. "Look at the size of those structures," Katie whispered. "Some of those buildings must be miles tall." "The Zorathians have had a long time to build," Alex said. "Their empire is older than human civilization." The ship landed at a spaceport that was bigger than most human cities. As Jake, Katie, and Alex walked down the ramp, they saw hundreds of Zorathian guards waiting for them. Each guard carried a weapon that hummed with energy and wore armor that looked like it was made of living metal. A Zorathian in fancy robes stepped forward. He was taller than the others, with golden markings on his purple skin. "I am High Chancellor Vextar, Speaker for the Throne Council. You humans will follow me and speak only when spoken to." Jake kept his face calm, but inside he was already getting angry. The way this alien talked to them was like they were pets being told to behave. But he was here to make peace, not start a fight. They walked through corridors that seemed to go on forever. The walls were covered with pictures and writing that told the story of Zorathian victories over countless other species. Jake noticed that in every image the Zorathians were shown as noble and powerful, while other aliens were painted as weak and defeated. "Subtle," Katie muttered under her breath. Finally, they reached the throne room. Jake had to stop and stare. The room was enormous, big enough to fit a football stadium inside. The ceiling was so high that clouds formed near the top. Along the walls stood hundreds of Zorathian nobles, all wearing expensive clothes and jewelry. But it was the throne that took Jake's breath away. At the far end of the room, on top of a pyramid of steps, sat a chair made of crystal that seemed to glow with its own light. The crystal throne was beautiful and terrible at the same time. Jake could feel power coming from it, even from across the huge room. "That has been empty for 300 years, Alex whispered. "No one has been able to sit on it since the last emperor died." Chancellor Vextar led them to the center of the room. All around them, Zorathian nobles stared down with expressions of disgust and amusement. Jake heard some of them laughing and making comments in their own language. "Honored nobles of the Empire," Vexitar announced in a loud voice. "Behold the creatures that call themselves humans. They claim to be intelligent, yet they have only just learned to leave their own world. They wish to trade with us as if they have anything we could possibly want." The laughter grew louder. Jake felt his face getting red, but he forced himself to stay calm. This was exactly what Alex had warned him about. The Zorathians were trying to make them feel small and weak. "We come in peace," Jake said, his voice carrying clearly through the huge room. "Humanity seeks friendship with the Zorathian Empire. We believe our races can help each other." "Help?" Vextar's voice was full of mockery. "What could such primitive beings possibly offer us? You have been in space for less than a century. We have ruled the galaxy for millennia. You are like insects trying to bargain with gods." More laughter echoed through the throne room. Jake saw Katie's hand move toward her weapon, but he caught her eye and shook his head slightly. Starting a fight here would doom any chance of peace. Perhaps, Jake said carefully, we could discuss specific areas where cooperation might benefit both our peoples. Cooperation? Vextar seemed to find this incredibly funny. The only cooperation we need from humans is your obedience. You will accept the terms we give you, or you will leave our space and never return. The terms Vextar presented were basically slavery. Humans would give the Zorathians access to Earth's resources and technology. In return, the Zorathians would allow humans to exist. There would be no trade, no partnership, no respect. Jake listened to the demands with growing anger. Around him, the Zorathian nobles continued to laugh and make jokes about humans. He heard words like monkeys and barbarians even though he couldn't understand their language perfectly. These terms are unacceptable, Jake said finally. Unacceptable? Vextar's voice turned cold. You dare refuse the generous offer of the Zorathian Empire? You pathetic creatures are so low that you wouldn't even be worthy to sit on a servant's stool in this palace, let alone have opinions about our decisions. The Chancellor gestured toward the crystal throne. You humans think so highly of yourselves, yet not one of you would even be allowed near that seat of power. It would reject you instantly, as it has rejected countless unworthy Zorathians. Jake looked at the throne, then back at the sneering Chancellor. Something in the alien's tone made his decision for him. He had come here hoping to make friends, but it was clear that the Zorathians only understood strength. If sitting on your throne would prove humanity's worth, Jake said in a loud, clear voice that reached every corner of the huge room, then I accept that challenge. The laughter stopped instantly. The throne room fell completely silent. Every Zorathian eye was staring at Jake in shock and disbelief. Even his own people looked surprised. Chancellor Vextar's mouth hung open for a moment before he recovered. When he spoke again, his voice was full of cruel amusement. Very well, human. Let us see how the great crystal throne judges your worth. While Jake prepared to face the crystal throne, Dr. Alex Grant found himself unable to sleep. Something about the whole situation bothered him beyond just the obvious danger. The way Chancellor Vextar had spoken, the looks on some of the younger nobles' faces, the whispered conversations he had overheard, it all suggested there was more to this story than anyone was telling them. Alex had always been curious, which made him a good scientist. Now that curiosity was telling him that the Zorathians were hiding something important. So instead of resting, he decided to do what he did best: research. The palace library was enormous, with millions of books, data crystals, and recording devices from across the empire. Alex had asked for permission to study Zorathian culture, and the guards had allowed it, probably thinking it was harmless. After all, what could one human scholar learn in a single night? They had no idea how fast Alex could read, or how good he was at finding patterns in information. Most of the library contained exactly what he expected: histories of Zorathian victories, scientific achievements, and cultural records that painted the empire as glorious and eternal. But Alex had learned long ago that the most interesting information was usually hidden in the boring sections that nobody bothered to read. He found what he was looking for in the religious archives, buried among thousands of ancient texts that most Zorathians probably forgot existed. The writing was in an old form of their language that Alex could barely understand. But he was good with languages and had translation software to help. The first text that caught his attention was called The Words of the First Prophet, and it was full of strange poems and sayings that didn't make much sense. But one section made Alex's heart beat faster. When the stars grow cold and the empire cracks like old stone, when the noble blood grows thin and the throne sits empty, then shall come one from the young races. Not by blood shall he claim the seat of power, but by the fire of spirit that burns in the hearts of those who refuse to bow. Alex read the passage 3 times to make sure he understood it correctly. The translation software confirmed what he thought. This was talking about someone from outside the Zorathian Empire claiming the throne. Someone like Jake, but there was more. Alex dug deeper into the archives and found other texts that mentioned similar prophecies. A book called The Dreams of Emperor Zorathak contained this passage. I have seen in my sleep a vision of the future. The throne of crystal will know darkness for many lifetimes, rejecting all who come before it with noble blood and proud hearts. But when hope seems lost, it shall accept one who comes not to rule but to serve, not to conquer but to unite. Alex's hands were shaking as he copied the text. This wasn't just one old prophecy. It was a pattern that appeared in multiple sources across centuries. The ancient Zorathians had somehow known that their empire would one day face a crisis, and that an outsider would be needed to solve it. He found a third text, this one from a military leader named General Vorthak who had lived 500 years ago. The enemy of our empire is not any foreign army, but our own pride. We have forgotten that strength comes not from ruling over others but from lifting them up. When we remember this truth, it will come to us through one who was never taught to see other races as less than himself. Alex realized he had found something incredible, but he needed to understand more about what was really happening in the Zorathian Empire. The prophecy suggested that the empire was in some kind of crisis, but from the outside it looked as powerful as ever. He moved to the political archives, looking for recent reports from across the empire's territory. What he found there made everything clear, and it wasn't good news for the Zorathians. The outer worlds of the empire were in rebellion. Not all of them, and not openly, but the signs were everywhere for anyone who knew how to look. Production reports showed declining output from mining worlds. Military dispatches mentioned security operations and peacekeeping missions that sounded a lot like putting down uprisings. Trade records showed that whole systems had stopped sending goods to the capital. Alex found a secret report from just 6 months ago that laid out the truth. The Zorathian Empire was falling apart from the inside. Dozens of alien races that had been conquered and forced to serve were finally fighting back. The Zorathian military was stretched thin trying to hold everything together, and they were losing. Even worse, the Zorathians themselves were divided. The noble families were fighting each other for power, and nobody trusted anyone else. The report estimated that the empire had maybe 10 years left before it collapsed completely. No wonder they need that throne filled, Alex whispered to himself. They're desperate for a leader who can hold things together. But why would the throne accept a human when it had rejected every Zorathian for 3 centuries? Alex went back to the prophecies looking for clues. The answer was in a text called The Nature of the Crystal Throne, written by the emperor who had created it. The throne wasn't just looking for royal blood or military strength. It was designed to find leaders who had what the emperor called the true spirit, people who cared more about helping others than gaining power for themselves. According to the text, the throne could read a person's deepest thoughts and feelings. It looked for qualities like courage, compassion, and the willingness to sacrifice for others. These were the things that made a good ruler, not bloodline or titles. Alex realized why no Zorathian had been able to claim the throne in 3 centuries. Their entire culture was built on the idea that they were superior to other races. Anyone who grew up believing that would have thoughts that the throne would reject. But Jake was different. He had come here trying to make peace, not to conquer. He genuinely wanted to help both humans and Zorathians find a way to work together. Most importantly, he didn't think humans were better than other races. He just thought they deserved a chance to prove themselves. Alex spent the rest of the night gathering evidence. By morning, he had copies of dozens of prophecies, secret government reports and historical texts that painted a very different picture of the Zorathian Empire than what they showed to the galaxy. When he returned to their quarters, he found Jake getting ready for the challenge. Katie was checking her weapons, probably planning to fight their way out when things went wrong. "Jake, I need to tell you what I found," Alex said urgently. "Can it wait?" Jake asked. "I'm kind of busy preparing to either make history or get killed. This could help you make history instead of just getting killed." Alex spread his research across the table. "The Zorathians have been lying to us. Their empire is falling apart and they know it. More importantly, there are ancient prophecies that talk about exactly what's happening today." He showed Jake the prophecy texts and explained what he had learned about the throne's real purpose. Katie listened too, her eyes growing wider as Alex talked. "So you're saying the throne might actually accept him?" Katie asked. "I'm saying it was designed to accept someone like him," Alex replied. "The question is whether Jake is ready for what that means." Jake looked at the prophecies and reports spread across the table. If their empire is really falling apart, then sitting on that throne wouldn't just be about proving humans are worthy. It would mean taking responsibility for hundreds of worlds and billions of lives. "That's exactly right," Alex said. "The question is, are you ready for that kind of responsibility?" Jake was quiet for a long moment, thinking about what Alex had told him. Then he looked up with determination in his eyes. "I came here to help both our peoples," he said. "If sitting on that throne is how I can do that, then I'm ready." As they walked toward the throne room, Alex felt a mix of excitement and fear. If he was right about the prophecies, they were about to witness something that would change the galaxy forever. If he was wrong, they might all die in the next hour. But looking at Jake's confident stride, Alex began to believe that maybe, just maybe, an ancient Zorathian prophecy was about to be fulfilled by a human starship captain who refused to give up. The great throne room had never seen anything like this day. Jake could feel the weight of thousands of eyes watching him as he climbed the crystal steps toward the ancient seat of power. Each step seemed to take forever, and with each one, the throne's glow grew brighter. Around the massive room, Zorathians from every corner of the empire had come to watch. Nobles in their finest clothes, military officers with their chest full of medals, scientists and scholars who had studied the throne for decades, all of them expected to see a human destroyed by powers he couldn't possibly understand. Broadcasting drones floated silently through the air, sending images of this historic moment to every world in Zorathian space. Jake knew that billions of beings across hundreds of planets were watching him right now. The thought should have made him nervous, but instead it made him more determined. Chancellor Vextar stood at the base of the steps, his yellow eyes gleaming with cruel anticipation. "Citizens of the Empire," he called out in his booming voice. "You are about to witness why the Zorathian race stands above all others in this galaxy. Watch as the sacred throne rejects this primitive human and proves once again that only Zorathian blood is worthy of true power." Jake reached the halfway point of the stairs. The crystal throne loomed above him now, bigger than it had looked from the ground. The crystal itself was beautiful and terrifying, clear as glass in some places, deep blue in others, with veins of silver light running through it like frozen lightning. The throne wasn't just a chair. It was a work of art created by minds far more advanced than anything humans had ever built. But it was also alive. Jake could feel intelligence inside the crystal, ancient and patient. It was watching him, studying him, trying to decide if he was worthy of the power it represented. "Look at him hesitate," called out one of the nobles. "He knows the throne will destroy him." Jake wasn't hesitating from fear, though. He was thinking about what Alex had told him that morning. The throne didn't just grant power, it granted responsibility. If it accepted him, he wouldn't just be proving that humans deserved respect. He would be accepting the job of trying to hold together a crumbling empire and help billions of people across hundreds of worlds. Was he ready for that? Jake thought about his crew back on the Liberty, and about Earth with its blue oceans and green forests. He thought about all the humans who were counting on him to make a better future for their species. Then he thought about all the alien races under Zorathian rule who might be suffering because their leaders cared more about power than about helping people. He took another step up. The throne's glow was so bright now that it hurt to look at directly, but Jake kept his eyes on it anyway. He could hear a sound coming from deep inside the crystal, like singing or music, but not quite either one. "This is madness," General Korthax shouted from the crowd. "Stop this charade before the human gets himself killed and starts a war." But Vexitar raised his hand for silence. "Let the human learn his place. The throne's judgment will be final and absolute." Jake was almost at the top now. Only 5 more steps separated him from the crystal throne. He could feel power radiating from it like heat from a furnace. The air itself seemed to buzz with energy, making the hair on his arms stand up. Around the room, the Zorathians had fallen completely silent. Even the floating cameras seemed to hover more quietly, as if afraid to make noise during this crucial moment. Jake reached the final step. The crystal throne sat directly in front of him now, close enough to touch. Up this close, he could see that the crystal wasn't completely solid. Deep inside it, lights moved like living things, swirling in patterns that seemed almost like thoughts made visible. He looked back down at the crowd below. Katie stood with the human delegation, her hand ready to draw her weapon if things went wrong. Alex was watching with the intense expression he got when he was trying to solve a difficult puzzle. Around them, Hundreds of Zorathian faces stared up with expressions ranging from curiosity to hatred to barely concealed hope. "Well, human," Vextar's voice echoed through the chamber. "Are you going to stand there all day, or are you going to sit down and let the throne reject you so we can end this foolishness?" Jake turned back to the throne. This was it. The moment that would decide not just his fate, but possibly the fate of both humans and Zorathians. He thought one more time about the prophecies Alex had found, about empires falling and new leaders rising from unexpected places. Then he sat down. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. The moment Jake's body touched the crystal, the throne exploded with light. Not the gentle glow it had shown before, but a brilliant radiance that filled the entire chamber and forced everyone to shield their eyes. Jake felt the throne's power flow into him like electricity, but it didn't hurt. Instead, it felt like the crystal was reading every thought he had ever had, every memory, every hope and fear. It was looking into his soul to see what kind of person he really was. The sensation was incredible and terrifying. Jake felt like his whole life was being examined by an intelligence older and wiser than anything he had ever imagined. The throne was seeing everything. His childhood on Earth, his training as a starship officer, his hopes for peace between the species, his willingness to sacrifice himself for others. But the throne wasn't just reading his mind, it was also showing him things. Jake suddenly understood the history of the Zorathian Empire in ways he never could have learned from books. He saw the great battles and victories, but also the mistakes and cruelties. He felt the weight of ruling over hundreds of worlds and billions of lives. Most importantly, he saw why the throne had rejected so many Zorathians over the centuries. They had come to it seeking power for themselves, wanting to rule because they believed they deserved to be obeyed. But the throne was looking for something different. Someone who wanted to lead not for personal glory but to help others. The light from the throne grew even brighter, and Jake heard gasps of amazement from the crowd below. But he was barely aware of them now. He was lost in communion with the ancient intelligence that lived inside the crystal. Then suddenly the throne began to speak. Not with words, but with a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. It spoke in the old Zorathian language, the formal speech of ancient emperors. "Behold," the voice said, "one who comes not to conquer but to serve, one who seeks not power for himself but justice for all. The fire of leadership burns bright in this one, though he comes from a race unknown to the builders of this throne." The crowd below was in chaos. Some Zorathians were cheering, others were shouting in anger or disbelief. Jake could hear arguments breaking out as nobles tried to process what they were seeing. But the throne wasn't finished. Its voice grew louder, filling every corner of the massive room. For 3 centuries, this throne has waited for one worthy to claim it. Many have tried, all have failed, because they sought to rule from above rather than to lift others up. But this one understands the true nature of leadership. This one has the unbending will that the first emperors possessed. Jake felt the throne's power settle into him more deeply. He was still himself, but he was also more than he had been before. He could sense the thoughts and feelings of everyone in the room. He could feel the hope of the alien servants and the fear of the corrupt nobles. Most of all, he could feel the desperate need of an empire that was falling apart and looking for someone to save it. The throne's final words echoed through the chamber like thunder. "Rise, Emperor Jake Morrison, first of his name, protector of all worlds, guardian of all peoples. May your reign bring justice where there was oppression, unity where there was division, and hope where there was despair." The light faded gradually, leaving Jake sitting on the crystal throne with its gentle blue glow surrounding him like a crown. The throne room was completely silent except for the sound of a few Zorathians who had fainted hitting the floor. Jake looked out at the crowd, seeing them with new eyes. Some faces showed joy and relief, especially among the alien servants and younger nobles. Others showed shock and anger, particularly among the older traditionalists who had expected him to fail. Chancellor Vexitar's face had gone completely white beneath his purple skin. His mouth moved, but no sound came out. Jake stood up from the throne, feeling its power still flowing through him. When he spoke, his voice carried clearly to every corner of the room. I accept the responsibility this throne has given me, he said. I will rule not as a conqueror, but as a protector. Not as someone who stands above others, but as someone who lifts others up. The age of oppression in this empire is over. The age of unity begins now. The silence that followed Jake's words was like the calm before a storm. Then all at once the throne room erupted into chaos. Impossible! General Korthax roared, pushing through the crowd toward the throne. No alien can rule the Zorathian Empire. This is some kind of trick. But before he could reach the steps, the crystal throne itself responded. The ancient intelligence that lived within it spoke again, this time in a voice that made the walls themselves vibrate with power. Hear now the truth that has been hidden from you, the throne's voice boomed. This seat of power was never meant to choose rulers by the color of their blood or the world of their birth. It was designed to find those with the true spirit of leadership, regardless of their species or origin. The throne's glow intensified, and suddenly holographic images appeared in the air above it. They showed scenes from the Empire's ancient past, the first emperor who had built the throne. The early days when different species worked together instead of one ruling over others. The founders of this empire understood that strength comes from unity, not domination, the throne continued. But their descendants forgot this wisdom, choosing instead to believe that power belonged to them by right of birth. For 3 centuries I have rejected all who came before me because they carried this poison in their hearts. Chancellor Vextar found his voice at last. You cannot be serious. A human emperor? The noble families will never accept this. The noble families will accept what I decree, the throne replied coldly. Or they will learn what happens to those who defy the rightful ruler of this empire. To prove its point, the throne sent out a pulse of energy that knocked several of the loudest protesters to their knees. The message was clear. The throne's power was absolute, and it had chosen Jake Morrison as emperor. Jake raised his hand, and somehow the gesture commanded attention from everyone in the room. He was still learning to use the connection he now shared with the throne, but he could feel its ancient wisdom guiding him. I know this is difficult to accept, he said, his voice carrying a new authority that seemed to come from the throne itself. For 1,000 years you've been taught that only Zorathians can rule this empire. But empires built on the idea that one race is superior to all others are doomed to fail. Your own history proves this. He gestured to the holographic images still floating in the air. Look at your ancestors. The first emperors ruled by bringing different peoples together, not by keeping them apart. That's why their empire grew strong. But when later rulers decided that Zorathian blood made them better than everyone else, the empire began to weaken. Lies, shouted a noble from the crowd. The empire has never been stronger. Really? Jake's voice was calm but firm. Then why are 17 systems in open rebellion? Why has trade income dropped by 40% in the last 5 years? Why are your own military reports talking about maintaining order, instead of celebrating victories? The noble's face went pale. Those were classified military secrets that no human should have known about. But Jake was no longer just a human starship captain. The throne had shared its knowledge with him, including access to the Empire's most sensitive information. Dr. Alex Grant stepped forward from the human delegation. Emperor Morrison is correct, he said loudly. I spent last night in your archives reading your own records. Your empire is collapsing because you've forgotten how to lead through inspiration instead of fear. You dare spy on us? Vextar snarled. I dare to seek the truth, Alex replied. And the truth is that every great prophecy in your history has been leading to this moment. Your own ancient texts speak of an outsider who would claim the throne when the empire needed saving. The throne pulsed with approval. The human speaks wisely. Let all who doubt look upon the prophecy of the first prophet. Written 800 years ago. New holographic text appeared in the air. Written in the ancient Zorathian script but somehow readable by everyone in the room. It was the same prophecy Alex had found in the archives. Speaking of one from the young races who would rule not by blood but by the fire of spirit. This prophecy has been in our archives all along, whispered a young noble. How did we miss it? Because you didn't want to see it, Jake answered. It's easier to believe you're superior to other races than to accept that leadership isn't about what species you belong to. General Korthax stepped forward, his scarred face twisted with rage. Prophecy or no prophecy, I will not bow to an alien usurper. The military will never accept this madness. The military will follow their rightful emperor, the throne replied, and its voice carried a warning that made even the general take a step back, as will all others who serve this empire, or they will face the consequences of treason. But Jake held up his hand again. General, I understand your anger. You've served this empire faithfully for decades, and now you're being asked to accept something that goes against everything you were taught. I'm not asking you to like it. I'm asking you to give me a chance to prove that I can be the leader your people need. The general's yellow eyes burned with hatred, but he seemed to be thinking. Around him, other military officers watched to see what he would do. Their decision could determine whether Jake's rule began with a civil war or a chance at peace. What would you know about leading warriors? Korthax demanded. What battles have you fought?
What victories have you won?
I've fought the battle against prejudice and hatred, Jake replied. I've won the victory of bringing two different species together in friendship instead of war. And right now I'm fighting the battle to save your empire from destroying itself. The throne pulsed with warm light, showing its approval of Jake's words. Several of the younger military officers nodded thoughtfully, but Korthax's face remained hard and unconvinced. Pretty words, the general said. But words don't win wars or hold empires together. You'll need more than speeches when the rebellion spread and the other galactic powers see weakness in our leadership change. Then help me, Jake said simply. Use your experience and knowledge to make this empire stronger. I'm not here to destroy Zarathian traditions or push aside Zarathian leaders. I'm here to bring out the best in all of us. For a moment, something flickered in the general's eyes. Then his expression hardened again. I will not serve an alien emperor. If the throne has truly chosen you, then prove yourself worthy in the crucible of war. We'll see how long your reign lasts when the real challenges begin. With that, he turned and stalked out of the throne room. Several other traditional nobles followed him, their faces showing the same mixture of anger and disbelief. But many others remained. Katie noticed that most of the younger Zarathians stayed, along with representatives from the alien servant races who served the empire. Their expressions ranged from curiosity to hope to barely concealed excitement. Your Majesty, said a voice from the crowd. An elderly Zorathian female approached the throne, moving slowly but with dignity. I am Scholar Lyrix, keeper of the Imperial Archives. I have studied the prophecies all my life, waiting for this day to come. How may we serve you? Jake felt a warmth from the throne, as if it approved of the old scholar's words. Help me understand what needs to be fixed, he said. Show me where the Empire is strongest and where it's weakest. I can't rule wisely without knowing the truth about the realm I've inherited. More voices joined in, offering support and service. Jake realized that not all Zarathians were like Vextar and Korthax. Many of them genuinely wanted their empire to be better, and they were willing to follow a human emperor if he could deliver on his promises of justice and unity. But he also knew that the ones who had left the throne room weren't giving up. They would regroup and plan, looking for ways to remove him from power or prove that he was unfit to rule. The real test of his reign was just beginning. The throne seemed to sense his thoughts. The path ahead will not be easy, its voice whispered in his mind, heard only by him. There will be those who fight against change, even when that change could save them. But remember, you do not rule alone. The throne's wisdom is now yours, and the loyalty of the worthy will follow. Jake nodded, understanding. He looked out at the faces still gathered in the throne room, some human, some Zarathian, some from other alien races. Each one represented billions of people whose lives would be affected by the choices he made as emperor. It was the biggest responsibility anyone had ever given him. But as he felt the throne's ancient power flowing through him, Jake Morrison knew he was ready to accept it. Jake Morrison sat alone in the emperor's private chambers, staring out at the alien city that now lay under his rule. The crystal throne had moved him here after the ceremony, its power transporting him instantly to rooms that had been empty for 3 centuries. Everything was still there from the last emperor: furniture, personal items, even clothes that would never fit a human body. It felt surreal. 24 hours ago, he had been Captain Jake Morrison of the UES Liberty, worried about making a good impression in diplomatic meetings. Now he was Emperor Jake Morrison, ruler of hundreds of worlds and billions of lives. The weight of that responsibility was almost crushing. A soft chime announced a visitor. Come in, Jake called and was relieved to see Katie Bell enter. At least some things hadn't changed completely. How are you holding up? She asked, settling into a chair that was too big for her human frame. Honestly, I'm terrified, Jake admitted. When I sat on that throne, it seemed like the right thing to do. Now I'm wondering if I've made the biggest mistake in human history. Katie studied his face. The Jake Morrison I know doesn't make mistakes that big. You saw something the rest of us missed and you acted on it. That's what good leaders do. Before Jake could respond, another chime announced more visitors. Alex Grant entered, followed by Scholar Lyrics and two other Zerathians that Jake didn't recognize. Your Majesty, Scholar Lyrics said with a deep bow, I've brought military advisor Zereth and economic counselor Tivek. They served the last emperor and have been waiting for someone to claim the throne. Jake looked at the two Zerathians. Both were older, with the kind of tired eyes that came from years of watching problems grow worse without being able to fix them. Please sit down, Jake said, and call me Jake when we're in private. I'm still getting used to the whole emperor thing. Advisor Zerath looked uncomfortable. That would not be appropriate, Your Majesty. The throne has chosen you. You must be treated with the respect that position demands. The throne chose me because I want to help people, not because I need them to bow to me, Jake replied. I can't help anyone if I don't understand what's really going on. So please tell me the truth about this empire. The two advisors exchanged glances with Scholar Lyrics. Then Tivek, the economic counselor, pulled out a data pad and began to speak. The truth is not good, Your Majesty. The empire is facing the worst crisis in its history. 17 systems are in open rebellion. Another 30 are showing signs of unrest, and our military is stretched too thin to maintain order everywhere. Zerath nodded grimly. The rebellions aren't random either. They're coordinated by species that have been oppressed for generations. The Kalari miners, the Thaxian farmers, the Vorthan shipbuilders. They're all rising up at once because they see the empire is weak. And they're not wrong, Tivek continued. Our economy is collapsing because we've relied on forced labor and tribute payments for so long that we forgot how to create real prosperity. When the outer world stopped sending resources, our whole system began to fall apart. Jake felt the throne's presence in his mind, confirming what the advisors were telling him. The ancient intelligence had watched the empire's decline for centuries, unable to act because no worthy ruler had claimed it. What about the noble families? Jake asked. Will they support reforms or will they fight me? Some will support you, Scholar Lyrics answered. The younger generation especially has been frustrated with the old ways. But families like the Korthax clan and the Vextar house have too much to lose if the system changes. They'll fight any reforms that threaten their power. Alex had been listening quietly, but now he spoke up. Jake, there's something else you need to know. I've been monitoring communications from Earth. Word about what happened here is spreading fast. Jake felt his stomach tighten. What's the reaction? Mixed, Alex said carefully. Admiral Lisa Stone and the Earth government are excited because they think this gives humanity a huge advantage in galactic politics. But there are also people who are worried that you've taken on too much responsibility and might not be able to come home. Katie leaned forward. What do you mean not be able to come home? The Crystal Throne isn't just a seat of power, Scholar Lyrics explained. It bonds with its chosen ruler. No emperor in history has ever abdicated or stepped down. They ruled until they died, and then the throne waited for the next worthy successor. Jake felt a chill run through him. Are you saying I'm stuck here for the rest of my life? The throne's power comes with a price, Zerath said solemnly. It grants wisdom and authority, but it also creates a connection that cannot be broken. You are now part of the empire in ways that go beyond simple politics. Jake stood up and walked to the window again. Below him, the alien city stretched to the horizon, full of beings whose lives depended on the decisions he would make. But somewhere among the stars was Earth with its blue oceans and familiar faces. Your Majesty, Tivek said quietly, forgive me for asking, but do you regret claiming the throne? Jake was quiet for a long moment, thinking about the question. The throne's presence in his mind stirred, waiting for his answer. No, he said finally. I don't regret it, but I need to understand what accepting this responsibility really means. He turned back to the group. Show me everything. All the problems, all the rebellions, all the economic data. If I'm going to be emperor, then I need to know exactly what kind of mess I've inherited. The next few hours were overwhelming. The advisors brought in reports, maps, and data that painted a picture of an empire in terminal decline. The Zarathian military was losing ground to rebels on multiple fronts. The economy was propped up by increasingly desperate measures that couldn't last much longer. Corruption was so widespread that many government officials were actively working against imperial interests. "How long do we have?" Jake asked when they finished. "Without major changes? Maybe 2 years before total collapse," Tivek answered. "With the right reforms and strong leadership? We might be able to turn things around, but it would take decades. And it would require massive changes that the traditional power structure will fight with everything they have," Zerath added. Jake felt the throne's wisdom flowing through him, showing him possibilities and potential solutions. But every path forward was dangerous and would require sacrifices. "There's something else," Alex said hesitantly. "Admiral Stone sent a message. Earth wants you to return for consultations before you make any major decisions as Emperor." "And what did you tell her?" "That you're not just representing humanity anymore. You're responsible for this entire empire." Jake looked around the room at the faces watching him, human and alien, young and old, all waiting for him to make the choice that would determine not just his future, but the future of hundreds of worlds. The throne's voice whispered in his mind, "A true leader does not choose power for himself, but accepts it for the sake of others. The question is not whether you want this burden, but whether you are willing to bear it." Jake took a deep breath. When he spoke, his voice was steady and sure. "Send a message to Admiral Stone. Tell her that Emperor Jake Morrison appreciates Earth's concern, but my duty now is to all the beings of this empire. I won't abandon them when they need me most." He looked around the room at his advisors and friends. "We have work to do. This empire is broken, but it's not dead yet. If we're smart and brave enough, we can fix it. But first I need to know, are you all willing to help me try?" One by one, they nodded their agreement. Even the Zarathian advisors, despite their obvious concerns about serving a human emperor, seemed determined to help him succeed. Jake felt the throne's approval like a warm current flowing through him. The ancient intelligence had waited 3 centuries for someone willing to take on this challenge. Now the real work could begin. "Good," Jake said. "Then let's get started. We have an empire to save." Jake stood before the crystal throne, feeling its ancient power flowing through him as he prepared to issue his first decree as emperor. The great throne room was packed with beings from across the empire, Zarathian nobles, alien representatives, military officers, and members of the press who would broadcast his words to hundreds of worlds. The past week had been a whirlwind of meetings, reports, and planning sessions. Jake had learned more about governing an interstellar empire than he ever thought possible. The throne's wisdom helped, but even with ancient knowledge guiding him, the decisions ahead were his to make. "Citizens of the empire," Jake began, his voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber. "For too long, this empire has been built on the idea that some beings are more worthy than others, that some species deserve to rule while others deserve only to serve. Today, that changes." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some sounded hopeful, others worried or angry. "My first decree as emperor is this. The caste system that has divided our empire is hereby abolished. No longer will any being's worth be determined by their species, their birth world, or their family lineage. All citizens of this empire will have equal rights under imperial law." The reaction was immediate and explosive. Alien representatives cheered and wept with joy. Many younger Zarathians applauded enthusiastically, but the older nobles looked shocked and furious. "Furthermore," Jake continued, his voice rising above the noise, "I am establishing the Imperial Council of Worlds. This council will have representatives from every species and every system in our empire. They will advise me on matters of law and policy, ensuring that all voices are heard in the halls of power." Chancellor Vextar jumped to his feet. "This is madness. You cannot simply overturn thousands of years of tradition with a few words." The crystal throne pulsed with light, and when Jake spoke again, his words carried the weight of imperial authority. "I can and I will. The throne has chosen me to lead this empire, and I will lead it toward justice, not oppression." But even as many in the crowd celebrated, Jake knew that his real problems were just beginning. The traditional power structure wouldn't accept these changes quietly. General Korthax proved this within hours of Jake's speech. Reports came flooding in that the general had declared Jake's rule illegitimate and was gathering military forces to restore proper order to the empire. Dozens, of noble families were joining what they called the Restoration Movement. How many ships does he have? Jake asked military advisor Zarath as they studied tactical displays in the war room. At least 200 warships, including some of our most powerful battlecruisers, Zarath replied grimly. Many of the fleet commanders are traditionalists who believe only a Zorathian should rule. Katie Bell, now serving as Jake's military aide, pointed to regions on the star map. But look at this. The outer systems that were rebelling against the Empire are now declaring loyalty to you. Your reforms have given them hope. That's not necessarily good news, Alex warned. It means we're looking at a civil war between the core worlds and the outer territories. Jake felt the throne's presence in his mind, sharing tactical knowledge from ancient military campaigns. How long before Korthax can move his forces into position to attack the capital? 3 days, maybe 4, Zarath answered. But your majesty, our forces here are outnumbered. The home fleet has only 70 ships, and many of those crews are of questionable loyalty. Then we need to even the odds, Jake said. He opened a communication channel to the entire Imperial fleet. This is Emperor Jake Morrison. I know many of you are confused and concerned about recent events. Some of your commanders are telling you to fight against the lawful government of this empire. I'm asking you to make your own choice. On screens throughout the fleet, Jake's image appeared. Behind him, the crystal throne glowed with its ancient authority. I didn't ask to become your emperor, Jake continued. The throne chose me because it saw something in my heart that it found worthy. Not because I'm human, but because I believe all beings deserve to be treated with dignity and respect. If you share that belief, then I ask for your help. If you don't, then I respect your right to make your own decision. The response was immediate and surprising. Nearly half of Korthax's fleet declared for Jake, their crews refusing to fight against an emperor chosen by the throne itself. Entire squadrons broke away from the restoration forces and jumped to the capital system. But Korthax still had enough ships to pose a serious threat, and he was already moving toward Zarethia Prime with battle intentions. We need allies, Jake said. Real ones. Not just ships defecting from the other side. The Kalari Mining Confederation has offered to send their defense fleet, reported a communication officer. The Thaxian Agricultural Union is mobilizing as well. They say they're ready to fight for the first emperor who's ever offered them real freedom. Jake felt a mixture of hope and worry. These alien fleets would be crucial in the coming battle. But their ships weren't as advanced as Zorathian military vessels. The war would be won or lost based on tactics and determination, not just raw firepower. There's something else, Alex said, looking up from his data pad. I'm getting reports from across the Empire. Worlds that have been under Zorathian control for generations are rising up. Not against you, but in support of you. They're calling it the Freedom War. The next 2 days passed in a blur of preparation. Ships from across the Empire converged on the capital system. The Kalari brought their tough mining vessels converted for combat. The Thaxian agricultural world sent cargo ships loaded with fighters. Even species that had been enslaved for generations found old warships and joined the growing fleet. Katie worked tirelessly to coordinate the diverse forces. It's like nothing I've ever seen, she told Jake. We have ships from 40 different species all working together. Most of them can barely communicate with each other. But they're all united by the idea that you represent a chance for real change. When Korthax's fleet finally arrived, they faced not just the Imperial Home Guard, but a coalition unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The battle began with traditional ship-to-ship combat, but quickly evolved into something more complex. Jake found himself not just commanding the defense, but inspiring it. The throne's connection let him communicate with ship commanders across multiple species, coordinating attacks and defenses in real time. For the first time in Imperial history, Zorathian and alien crews fought side by side as equals. The enemy flagship is targeting our command ship, reported the tactical officer. Let them come, Jake said calmly. All allied vessels execute Formation Delta. Show them what unity can accomplish. The mixed fleet moved with surprising coordination. Kalari mining ships used their industrial equipment to disable enemy engines. Thaxian agricultural vessels released clouds of metallic chaff that confused Zorathian targeting systems. Human tactical doctrine adapted for alien crews turned the diverse fleet into a force greater than the sum of its parts. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it ended, Korthax's forces were scattered or surrendered. The general himself was taken prisoner. his flagship crippled by a coordinated attack from 12 different species working together. "This is impossible," Korthak said when they brought him before the throne. "Aliens cannot fight like this. They're too inferior to coordinate such tactics." "That's your problem, General," Jake replied. "You never learned that different doesn't mean inferior. These aliens just prove they can outfight your supposedly superior forces when they're given a chance." The victory sent shockwaves across the Empire. Traditional Zorathian supremacist groups found themselves isolated as more and more worlds declared support for the new emperor. The revolution that had started with Jake's first decree was spreading faster than anyone could have imagined. "The restoration movement is collapsing," Scholar Lyrics reported a week after the battle. "Noble families that supported Korthax are now begging for amnesty. The outer worlds are forming new governments based on your model of equality." Jake stood in the throne room, looking out at representatives from dozens of species who had come to pledge their loyalty. He had started this journey just wanting to make peace between humans and Zorathians. Now he found himself leading a galactic revolution. "Your Majesty," said a voice behind him. Jake turned to see a young Zorathian officer, her purple skin marked with the scars of recent battle. "You fought with the Kalari mining ships," Jake remembered. "Commander Zarath, wasn't it?" "Yes, Your Majesty. I wanted to thank you." The young officer's voice was full of emotion. "My grandmother was half Kalari. Under the old system, that made me second class, barely worthy to serve. Now for the first time I feel truly proud to wear the Imperial uniform." Jake felt the throne's approval flowing through him. This was what the ancient intelligence had been waiting for. Not just a ruler, but a leader who could unite instead of divide. "The revolution isn't over yet," he told the assembled crowd. "We've won the right to build something better, but building it will be the real challenge. Are you ready to help create an empire based on justice instead of oppression?" The roar of approval that answered him could be heard across the entire capital city. The human emperor's first decree had not just changed laws. 1 year after the Battle of Zorathia Prime, Emperor Jake Morrison stood before the largest gathering in galactic history. The Great Assembly Hall on the neutral world of Nexus Station had been expanded 3 times to accommodate representatives from over 400 worlds. For the first time since the Empire's founding, every species and every system had an equal voice in government. The transformation had not been easy. The past year had brought challenges that would have broken a lesser leader, but Jake had the wisdom of the Crystal Throne to guide him, and the support of beings from across the galaxy who believed in his vision of unity. "Citizens of the Federated Empire," Jake began, his words translated instantly into hundreds of languages. "When I first sat upon the Crystal Throne, I promised to create an empire based on justice instead of oppression. Today, we celebrate not just what we have accomplished, but what we will build together in the years to come." In the audience, Jake could see faces he had come to know well over the past year. Katie Bell sat with the other military advisors, her uniform now bearing the insignia of Supreme Fleet Commander. Alex Grant was among the scientific advisors, working to share knowledge freely between species instead of hoarding it for Zorathian benefit alone. Even some former enemies were present. General Korthax had eventually accepted Jake's offer of redemption and now served as an advisor on military reform. The changes had been dramatic. The old caste system was not just abolished but replaced with a merit-based system that judged beings by their actions and abilities rather than their species. The tribute payments that had drained outer worlds for generations were ended, replaced by fair trade agreements that benefited everyone involved. The old empire was built on fear and domination, Jake continued. Our new federation is built on cooperation and mutual respect. We have proven that different species working together can achieve more than any single race ruling over others. The proof was all around them. The Kalari had used their mining expertise to help develop new worlds. The Thaxian agricultural techniques were ending food shortages on dozens of planets. Human military tactics, adapted for multi-species crews, had created the most effective peacekeeping force in galactic history. But perhaps the most important change was in the way beings from different species saw each other. The old prejudices were slowly fading as people worked side by side and discovered that cooperation was more rewarding than conquest. "Your Majesty?" said a voice from the audience. Jake recognized Speaker Vorthak, a Zorathian who had become one of his strongest supporters. What message do you have for those who still doubt that this new order can last? Jake smiled. It was a fair question. There were still holdouts, still groups that preferred the old ways of doing things. Some Zorathian traditionalists had formed isolated communities where they could maintain their beliefs in racial superiority. Some outer worlds were still suspicious of any central authority, even a benevolent one. I would say this, Jake replied. Change is never easy, and not everyone will embrace it immediately. But look around this room. Look at the beings sitting next to you, working beside you, fighting alongside you. A year ago, most of you saw each other as aliens to be feared or controlled. Today, you see each other as citizens of a common cause. He gestured toward the viewing screens that showed images from across the Federation. On Kalari Prime, Zorathian engineers are working with local miners to develop new extraction techniques that don't harm the environment. On Thax, human agricultural specialists are learning farming methods that could feed entire star systems. On Earth, alien students are studying at our universities while human students learn on worlds they never imagined visiting. The truth was even more remarkable than his words suggested. In just 1 year, the Federated Empire had made advances that the old Zorathian Empire had failed to achieve in centuries. Free exchange of knowledge and technology had sparked innovations across every field of study. Trade was booming as worlds specialized in what they did best and shared their products freely. But perhaps the greatest achievement is this, Jake said, looking directly into the cameras that broadcast his words across the galaxy. For the first time in galactic history, we have an empire where any being, regardless of their species or origin, can rise to the highest levels of government based on their merit and dedication to the common good. To prove his point, Jake introduced his new cabinet. Chancellor Lyrics, the old Zorathian scholar, served alongside Fleet Commander Bell and Science Advisor Grant. But there were also beings from dozens of other species, a Kalari trade minister, a Thaxian agricultural secretary, a Vorthan technology coordinator, and many others. These beings were chosen not because of their race or their connections, but because they have proven themselves capable of serving all citizens of our Federation, Jake explained. This is what true equality looks like. As the formal session ended, Jake found himself approached by representatives from beyond the Federation's borders. Other galactic powers had been watching the transformation with great interest, and many were beginning to reconsider their own systems of government. Emperor Morrison, said Ambassador Quell of the Andorian Republic, my government is interested in establishing formal diplomatic relations with your Federation. We're particularly impressed by your economic growth rates and social stability indicators. Similar requests came from the Centauri Alliance, the Free Traders Consortium, and even the previously isolationist Rigel Confederacy. The Federation's success was inspiring change across the galaxy, but it was a smaller, more personal moment that meant the most to Jake. As he prepared to leave the assembly hall, a young human girl approached with her parents. They were colonists from one of the outer rim worlds that had joined the Federation. Are you really the Emperor? The girl asked, looking up at Jake with wide eyes. I am, Jake replied, kneeling down to her level. But more importantly, I'm a citizen just like you are. What's your name? Sarah, the girl replied shyly. My mom says you made it so humans and aliens can be friends. Your mom is very smart, Jake said. But I didn't do it alone. It took a lot of people working together to make that happen. Sarah's father stepped forward. Your Majesty, my daughter was born on Thax. Her best friend is a young Thaxian, and she can't understand why that used to be unusual. To her, it's just normal that different species get along. Jake felt the Crystal Throne's presence in his mind, warm with approval. This was the real victory, not the military battles or the political reforms, but the simple fact that a new generation was growing up in a galaxy where cooperation was normal and prejudice was the exception. Later that evening, Jake stood alone in his private chambers aboard the Federation flagship. Through the viewport, he could see ships from dozens of species traveling together in peaceful formation. It was a sight that would have been impossible just 2 years ago. The throne's voice spoke in his mind. You have done well, Jake Morrison. The empire I once knew was built on the strength of conquest. The Federation you have created is built on the strength of unity. It will endure long after both of us are gone. Jake thought about the prophecies Alex had found in the ancient archives, about the outsider who would come to claim the throne when the empire needed saving. He had fulfilled those prophecies, but in a way that none of the ancient seers could have imagined. A communication alert drew his attention. It was a message from Earth, from Admiral Stone and the human government. "Jake," Admiral Stone's recorded image said, "the entire Sol system wants to thank you. Your actions haven't just saved the Zarathian Empire. You've opened up the galaxy for all of us. Humanity has been accepted into the Galactic Council as an equal partner, and it's all because of what you accomplished." But the message that meant the most came at the end.